Welcome to the tutorial Animating with IK. For this tutorial, I've created a whole new scene. So you'll see none of the animation that was previously done by Stacy in this scene. The question was raised as to how to string together the different scenes of an animation. Well, you actually have to create a different file for every scene for your animation, and after you've finished all the scenes, you would create multiple renders. So if you have 8 scenes, you'd create 8 renders, and then you would string together those 8 renders in a third-party software to make your complete animation. So this scene has the exact same background as our first scene. The way that I did that is I saved the last scene that we did together under a different name, and then I right-clicked on any layer where I wanted to clear all the keyframe values, and I selected clear all values. This one has no keyframes, so the clear all values menu item is grayed out. And then I just deleted any layers that I didn't want. So I deleted the birds, the door opening motion, I deleted the camera, truckin', the text, and the actual karate rabbit that Stacy had animated from the last scene. I also raised the punching bag up a bit because I noticed that with the chain, let me back out here, that the chain should actually be a separate piece, and this would actually be a good example for IK. If you had many links, you could put one bone per link, and then as the punching bag moved around, you could use IK to make it move around naturally with the swing of the punching bag. But as the chain is part of the punching bag drawing, I just lifted up to a level where you're unable to see it in the camera frame so that you won't be distracted by its unnatural motion. So the next thing we want to do is bring in the Karate Rabbit IK template from the library, the one that we created in the last tutorial. So I'll go to the Animate Pro library, I'll uncollapse it so I can see the Karate Rabbit folder, and from the folder I'll take the Karate Master IK template, and then I'll just drag it and drop it in the camera view. Okay, so the view that I want to use I'm just looking at this one keyframe I'm a little distracted by, that's sort of strange. The one view I actually do want to use, though, is the 3/4 view to punch this punching bag, and I will also scale the rabbit. So what I'm going to do is recollapse the peg, and I'm going to delete everything from before this keyframe that starts the 3/4 pose to the first frame. So I'm going to hold down the Shift key, select the first frame, and click delete. Then if we uncollapse the master peg, we can see that all of the cells and their subsequent keyframes have been deleted. And we'll do the same thing for all the frames after. And once again, if we uncollapse the peg, we can see that yes, there's just a row, a single row with cells and keyframes. And then I'm going to grab that keyframe and drag it all the way to the first frame. And next I'm going to extend the exposure because otherwise it's going to disappear after I move away from the first frame. So let's at least have it go till frame 60. There we go, so it's still here. And then in order to scale it properly, I'm going to unselect the Animate mode. So now whatever I do with the Transform tool will be done to every single cell in this row. So all of these cells for the entire animation, and there'll be no keyframe being recorded for the scaling that I'll be doing. So maybe something like that. So now let's click on the Animate mode again, as well as the Inverse Kinematics tool. And then let's go to the Tool Properties panel so that we can select the nails that we want. We have to select the body part first. So the animation that I'm going to make is I'm going to have the Karate Rabbit punch the punching bag. It's going to swing, and then as it swings back towards him, he's going to kind of do like a Matrix style swoop backwards to avoid the punching bag as it swings back towards him. So his feet will be glued in place, but his entire upper body, starting from the knees, will kind of bend backwards as the punching bag swings towards him. So in order to do this, we need to nail the feet down to the ground. So let's click somewhere in the master peg to bring up the IK skeleton, and then I'm going to zoom in a bit. So in order to select this foot, you have to hold down the Command key if you're using Mac or the Control key if you're using Windows. And you can see the foot has become yellow. But let's just double check in the timeline view to see what's been selected. Okay, so it's been the foot, but we really want the foot peg, so I'm going to go one higher. And then here in the Tool Properties panel, you can click on the nail button and it'll automatically lock down the pivot point of the foot. This is a general nail tool and it holds the foot down for X, Y, and Z translation. But just to be safe, this is most often used in combination with the hold orientation button. So I'm going to click that as well. And you see the blue line appear to denote that now the orientation has also been held. So the second way to create a nail is to actually just hold down the Shift key and to click on the pivot point where you'd like to insert that nail. So we just added one for this foot, but let me also Command click this foot to be sure that we selected the right thing. So if we look for the foot in the timeline and we scroll up, we'll see that in fact the drawing object has been selected, but none of the nails have been depressed. So if we go up the hierarchy to the foot peg, you'll see indeed the nail was added to the correct object, which is the foot peg. And on top of that, we'd like to add the hold orientation nail as well. So now that both of our feet have been nailed to the ground, what we're going to do is create the first pose. So I'm going to collapse the master peg. I'll collapse the entire group, and let's add a keyframe just to be sure that anything that we move is being keyframed on the first frame. So another use for the IK is actually to make natural looking poses. A lot of people like to set up their poses using the IK tool and then go back to the transform tool to do the actual animating. So that's another use for the IK. So what we want to do is click on the master peg to bring up the IK skeleton so that we can set up the first pose. So I'm going to zoom in a bit. And the first thing you have to be sure of is that this button is depressed, the IK manipulation mode. It's like the transform tool and the animate mode combined, so you know you're animating. And I want this character to bend slightly at the knees for the first pose. So I'm going to grab this middle bone that represents the master peg, we know this because of the cross, and pull down until the knees bend a bit, maybe just slightly like that. And then I actually want this foot to flip the other way. So I can't use the IK mode for this. I have to go back to the transform tool to forward kinematics, and I'm going to choose just this foot. I'm going to look for the timeline to make sure that I have the drawing object and not the peg this time, so we have it here. And then I'm going to scroll through the drawings by using one of the square brackets. So like that. I'm just going to position it into place. There we go, so it's flipped the right way. Then I'm going to go back to the IK mode, and I'm going to bring up the hands. So a command selected to select the hand, which will of course move the entire arm. So I want it bent to the elbow like this. Now if I just want to rotate the hand without the entire arm moving, I'm going to hold down Alt and move just the hand. And then I'm going to go back to the transform tool mode so that I can do another drawing substitution, and I'm going to scroll again till I get a fist. Now I'm going to do the same thing with the other hand. It might be a little bit harder to select. Because I have the drawing objects, I'm going to go up one to get the peg, go back to the inverse kinematics mode, and then come on, there we go, bring the arm up. So I want this one bent as well. There we go. Then I'm going to hold down Alt to rotate just the hand. And I'm going to go back to the transform tool to do a drawing substitution. Alright, I'll have to make sure I have the drawing layer selected if I want to do a drawing substitution, and maybe make a fist like that. So let's look at our rabbit so far. So that's not bad. And I think I might just flip the ear as well here. So Stacy uses the keyboard shortcuts, but I'm going to show you the ones that exist in the Tool Properties panel, which is right here, the flip horizontal. And then I can just rotate that to keep it in place. And then going back to the IK, I'm going to select the head. Actually, I think I have to select the neck. A bit like that. Rotate it a bit more. Kind of like that. And we haven't done much with the expressions, so I'm just going to flip through the facial expressions as well. There we go, so the correct eyebrows selected. Give him kind of like an angry look there, so it's not bad. So I'm going to zoom out, and that's what our first keyframed pose looks like. So for the next pose, I'm going to probably do it pretty quickly and maybe fast forward through it for the next two poses. And then I'll, of course, slow down the video if there's anything I feel that I need to comment on. Okay, so I've created 4 key poses. So we have the Karate Rabbit crouching, then a punch, then sort of a really dramatic backflip as the punching bag swings towards him, and then him standing upright again. So now I'm just going to move the keyframes to get a little bit of a better sense of timing. Try that. Play that to see what it looks like. Okay, so it's not bad. You'll notice though that as the computer plays to this interpolated section here, that the feet move, even though we had them nailed down. And as I explained before, the feet are only really nailed down for the keyframe, so this frame and this frame and this frame and this frame. But any interpolated movement in between doesn't guarantee that the feet will stay in place. So I'm going to show you a way to correct this sort of jiggling of the feet. And I'll turn on the onion skin so you're able to see it as well. The one thing you have to be 100% sure of before you try this correction technique that I'm about to show you is that the feet are 100% exactly in the same place for the 2 keyframes between an interpolated section. If there's a slight movement, what I'm about to show you won't work at all. So what we're going to do is find one of these feet in the timeline view. So I believe, yeah, it should be this one right here, this foot. But what we really want is the peg, right? Because that's what we're working with. So we're going to click on this keyframe here, and we're going to make sure that we have the inverse kinematics tool selected as well. And then we're going to click on this button here, which is the Apply IK Constraints mode. And then we're going to click on the inverse kinematics keyframe. So we've just added a keyframe for this foot on its peg. And then as we scroll across and we click on this keyframe here, we're going to click on the bone of this foot in the camera view. And then we get this message asking us if we want to apply the constraints for this foot, and we're going to say yes. So now as we scroll back and forth, you'll notice that this foot behind, so foot number 1, still moves, but foot number 2 doesn't. And you can see why. It's because it broke down the interpolation into keyframes, and at those keyframes, this foot is stiff for all of those keyframes. So we're going to do the exact same thing for the other foot. So what we want is the 01 foot peg right here. So we're going to click on the first keyframe again. So the Apply Constraints button has already been depressed, but we're going to add a keyframe there. Then we're going to scroll across to the next keyframe, and we're going to click on that foot in the camera view. And we get the same message, and we say yes. So now when we scroll across, we see that the foot doesn't move. Actually, I think I see it moving a little bit, and like I said, I think the reason why is probably because it wasn't 100% in the same place for this keyframe and this keyframe. And if that's the case, then there might still be a little bit of wobbling in between. For our purposes right now, this is really not bad, but if you want that perfect non-moving foot, you really have to be 100% sure that the 2 keyframe poses are identical. And a lot of the times they move around when you're animating with the IK manipulation mode and the IK tool here. So let's try to do it one more time though for this small interpolation here. So this is on, we add a keyframe, and you can see the keyframes that are being selected in this field here. Yes. And let's do the same thing for the other foot. So it's pretty good. There's like a slight tap here, which is a bit annoying, but you get the idea of what you should expect to see. And lastly, I wanted to add a bit of easing, so let's do that as well. So I'm going to select the upper body here, and then the last keyframe. And then from the E-shaped drop-down menu, I'm going to select Fast Ease Out. So as it falls back, it's going really fast, and as it comes towards this position, it's going to slow down just slightly to give it an extra bit of bounce. And the way that you get the keyframe to register this new ease parameter is by changing something ever so slightly in the camera view with the IK tool. So maybe I'll move the head a bit. There we go. So now when we play it, you notice it went a bit slower because there's a bit more of a bounce. I don't know if you see that, but I like it a little bit better. It gives a bit more of a spring to his movement. But you know, that's something you can tweak and play around with yourself. And I'm not going to animate the punching bag. I might do it for the sample material. I might shrink it down and have it swinging back and forth, coordinated with the rabbit's animation, but I'm not going to do it now because it's really not going to show you much in terms of inverse kinematics. So that's it for the tutorial, Animating with the IK, and it's also the last video in the Inverse Kinematics video series.